Hello, hello. Welcome back for another episode of Yarns for the Soul. I'm your host, Nicole, and I'm very excited that you have come back to join me another time. Um, I had a bit of a hiatus over Easter, finally gave myself a holiday. Um, Getting back up to speed now, bringing you lots of exciting new guests. Um, and very, very excited to introduce this episode's special guest. So, today I am yarning with my friend Regina, and we met on the other side of the world while I was doing a university exchange in Sweden. So, it was my final semester of study. Decided wanted to go somewhere completely different and just have a completely different experience, go somewhere where completely different culture, different language, all of the above. And I think it was my second day after I'd arrived that I met Regina, and she was from Vancouver in Canada. Um, and we ended up being like exchange besties, which was amazing. And I love that we've been able to keep in touch since then, because it's a fair few years ago now. I'm getting old. But she is sharing a very special part of her life with us today. And when this episode comes out, she will have been 1 year sober from alcohol, and absolutely love the way that she articulates and shares her story, and the fact that she's so available for all the vulnerability and showing up and wanting to share her story because she struggled to find resources when she went looking. And I think that's amazing that she's willing to show up for herself in her own journey and her own healing, but also to hopefully provide a safe space for other people when you may not know where else to turn. And, if parts of her story resonate with you or you can relate, then, yeah, you're more than welcome to get in touch with me, get in touch with her. And obviously the biggest thing is knowing that you're not alone. There's support out there, and as you'll hear, that's exactly what Regina found at the end of her journey. So excited to jump into that. If you are enjoying the podcast, hopefully, please let me know. You can rate, review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. So thank you so much for joining me, and let's jump in. Hello, Regina. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you so much for having me.
And we're kind of in celebration mode today, which is exciting. Well, like 2 days' time, celebration
hmm
mode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to share with the group, share with the world why we're celebrating?
Yes. So, April 17th is my 1 year anniversary of being sober.
Yes. Um,
Yes.
yeah. And I mean, I know I said celebrating, but I'm imagining that this could be the type of thing that there's a few different layers, different emotions going on. Is celebration the right feeling at the moment?
Yeah, that's so funny that you asked me that because like this whole week leading up to it, I've been on celebration mode, like super excited
Yeah.
and feeling actually quite peaceful about it. But the days coming up to it, a lot of emotions are
Mm,
coming up, and there's a bit of a nostalgic feeling, I guess, of the life that I had. And then also, I guess I mainly want to say, like, not nostalgic, but I
mm,
guess tons of emotions are coming up. It's really hard to describe it. Um, yeah, and it's one of those things where it was such a negative time when I
mm,
had to. I guess we'll talk about it at some point, but I guess like the the moment where I decided to get sober, I was in such a bad place, and now seeing where I am now, it's it, it I feel really good. So it's
Yeah.
that feeling of wow, like I can't even, grasp it in my head, everything that has happened, and it's coming up to a year, something that I never thought I'd be able to do.
Mm. It's like a whole range of emotions, and you're probably kind of morphed into this different version of yourself, possibly, that you probably couldn't have seen, or like you didn't know that you were going to get to this place a year ago.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a bit mad. And that person as well that I was before, I I want to be very gentle as well with her, and
Mm.
give myself from that time that respect as well, that I was doing the best that I could and
Yeah.
the best that I knew at that point. So I think maybe that's also where I'm having all these mixed emotions where I'm like, oh, I'm so happy that I'm coming up to my 1 year
Mm.
anniversary, but I'm also like, wow, everything that had to happen to get here, you know?
Yes, so many steps along the way, and I love that you've kind of reached that point where you're like, actually just be kind to your past self, and I think it
Hmm.
takes all of us a long time to get there, 'cause it's so easy to beat yourself up, right? We're like,
Yeah.
all those choices that past me made, but you're right, like you had to go through all of those steps to get
Hmm.
here in this new, like, shiny version of yourself.
Hmm. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Um, I was thinking, I was like, how do we kind of go back to where this all started? Because it was probably not like a definite time and place. It's like I was thinking about my own kind of experiences growing up and as a teenager and leaving home and being around alcohol for the first time. Um, what was like, do you remember what your sort of earlier interactions were with alcohol?
Yeah. So my my first ever interaction with alcohol was a little bit intense. Basically, I a friend and me decided to get this bottle of vodka from someone who could get us alcohol. We were maybe around 15
Yeah.
and went to the beach and started drinking it. And my friend wasn't drinking that much, like he kind of like
Mm,
knew his limits. And I, for me, it was like this discovery, like this gold in front of me, and I was feeling things that hadn't felt before. I felt
mm,
really free when I had my first drink, and I felt that
mm,
I also felt, I think, that I wanted to fit in, and I knew that that's what the cool kids were doing. Um, so I think for me, that first drink was definitely a little bit of a factor into my drinking,
mm,
in the following years. And that's just the start of it. I think that was like the little bit of a taste of what it was my drinking life was going to be like. Um,
mm,
and then it went on from there. I think as I grew up, it just spiraled or grew into something bigger. And
mm.
definitely as a teenager, more into my early 20s, that's, I guess, when I started to drink a little bit heavier and started going out partying a bit more, and
Mm,
never really understanding like the limits.
yes. Yeah. Did you still feel like into your early 20s? Was there quite a big feeling of, oh, like, I'm doing this to fit in?
mm, I think at some point in my early 20s, it was more the fact that I had almost embraced it as part of myself.
Oh,
um,
right.
yeah, I don't think I ever even thought about it at that point as this isn't me, like I'm just doing this to fit in. It
Mm,
was more like, this is who I am now, this is what I do.
ah, like it had
And
become sort of part of your identity, like it was part of
yeah,
who you were. So, like, as a
yeah.
teenager, how regularly would you have been drinking at that age?
So let's say when I was 17, I think 17 onwards, that's when I started drinking a little bit heavier. So I would
Mm,
have been drinking definitely every weekend,
yeah.
and definitely binge drinking. And I guess, if you
Mm,
think about it like that, everyone or anyone could say, at that age, it's the norm, you're a
Yeah,
teenager,
exactly.
you go out, you're with your friends, and in a way, yeah, it was normal. But
Mm,
for me, the way that I reacted to alcohol was what wasn't normal, and the way
mm,
that I wanted to drink alcohol wasn't normal. I I definitely would get to a place where I wasn't okay in the drinking, like in the nights, like I would.
mm,
It really depend on the night, but um, I would be drinking to the place or to the point where I would be out of it, or I would just become like a different person in terms of what I was saying or interacting, or I would
mm,
sometimes get angry, and it really just depended on the day. But I think that's something that I didn't realize at the point, that it wasn't normal to be reacting like that to alcohol when other
mm.
people weren't, and also to drink so much like I was when other people weren't drinking that much.
So it was sort of part of like, yeah, as you said, in the early 20s, like everyone's drinking, that it's so normalized. I think no matter where you are, that's kind of the norm, and it's the binge drinking. So even if you're only like, even if it's only once a week, it's like the quantity that everyone around you is drinking is normal. But did you find for you, there was something kind of beyond that? Was it to do with like how you were feeling or wanted to feel?
Um, it would have been, I'd say, in my mid 20s.
Mm,
So I think when I was younger, I would try to use alcohol just as a way to, yeah, like I said, to fit in, but also
mm,
because I thought that that's what, yeah, I wanted to do in my free time.
mm.
I I I just, yeah, I thought it was
Yeah.
normal. And I think it wasn't until I was a bit older, maybe my mid 20s. mm, I would say that life started getting, well, it didn't start getting
Life has
hard,
hit
but
you.
life, yeah, life was just being life, and I didn't realize it. But yes, little by little, I think I started using alcohol to sort of cover up feelings and
Mm,
emotions. So around 2020, maybe. Yeah, no, 2020, that's when I went through a difficult moment, I guess, like everyone else. But
mm,
on top of that, there were also some personal things happening.
mm,
And what happened then afterwards that I didn't realize, I in a way, I was doing a lot of progress, I guess,
mm,
spiritually. Like I was sort of finding myself, and I was
yeah.
changing a lot of things in my life. Like I started really being good about my health in terms of working out, eating well. But I didn't realize that the drinking was still a big part of my life. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was in my head. I was, I'm so healthy, but then
Mm,
the drinking was still there. And then because I had gone through a little bit of a rough time in that year,
mm,
the drinking wasn't helping. And I was actually doing a lot of things besides just the eating well and everything. I was going to therapy as well, so I was
mm,
trying to do a lot for my mental health. But I didn't realize that the drinking was having like the opposite effect on me.
yeah.
So yeah, as I was doing all these things that were helpful for me, I was giving myself this sort of poison that was the complete opposite. And I just ended up feeling terrible. So it was sort of like a cycle where I wouldn't feel good, or I'd feel sad or low. And then for me, the relief or the release was to go out with
Mm,
friends, or even like drink here at my home. But with friends, I
mm,
wouldn't really get into the habit of drinking by myself, but it was always very social. And I was looking for that release, and I would have
mm,
that drink and I would feel great. And then I would drink more, and because I couldn't never just drink one or two,
mm,
I'd get to the point where I was very drunk. And what would happen is the next day I'd feel completely, low. My mood was super low. I wasn't feeling myself, and I guess it's what you'd say it's part of a hangover. But as
Mm.
I got worse, I guess, in my mental health, where I wasn't taking care of it properly, the alcohol was just having such a bad effect on it. And so then I would think, okay, well, I'm feeling terrible. I can't wait for the next time I'm drinking because
Uh,
I can't wait to
mm,
have a good time. And so it became a cycle. And then that became, okay, well, I'm going to go out drinking on a Tuesday. Well, what
right.
about on a Thursday? Because I didn't want to go without drinking for long periods of time because I was looking for that high feeling or that
Mm,
moment of joy, which funnily enough, like I think maybe I would feel a little bit of joy like the before just before the first drink, and then as I started drinking,
mm.
it would be gone again, and I would be chasing that feeling like, yeah, just where is that joy that I want to feel? Because I'm drinking and I'm not feeling it, so I'm gonna drink more because I think I can get to it.
Mm, yeah. It's interesting that you're like objectively I'm doing all of these things right, like working on your health, physical health, mental health, doing everything right, but it's still not enough in some way, like it's still not working the way that you wanted it to. um
Hmm.
at that point in time, because you said like you're doing some therapy and stuff, was the drinking something that came up as part of that, or was it sort of perhaps a part of yourself you weren't quite acknowledging at that point?
Yeah, I was definitely blinded to it at that point. I never brought it up,
Mm,
and I never brought it up with anyone really. I never brought it up with my family or friends. Um, and especially in therapy, and
mm,
I think back now, and part of me thinks that the reason why I didn't bring it up in therapy was because I didn't want to acknowledge that there could be a problem,
yeah.
and especially in the really low moments where I felt like I depended on alcohol. I didn't
Mm,
really want anyone to know that that was a thing.
mm.
I don't think I even knew that was a thing. I just knew that it wasn't good to be telling people, you know? It,
So it wasn't like
yeah,
quite conscious yet, possibly.
exactly. It was very, very subconscious and
Mm,
at the same time very conscious that I didn't want to be seen like I had a problem or be judged about it.
mm. But
Yeah.
that at that point, do you think you were drinking like a similar amount or like quantity and that sort of stuff as the people that you were spending time with and going out with?
Um, I'd say to yeah, like
Mm,
in comparison to the people that I was going out with, friends and stuff, they would be drinking a similar amount. Maybe I couldn't say if they were drinking as often because with
mm,
I'd go out with different groups of friends and some of them I'd see just, every now and then. But there were a few that would be, the crowd that would be around and you know who to call, I guess, because they'd always be up for a drink sort of thing. And
yeah.
and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing that they were doing that, but
Mm,
it's more so the fact that if you have a problem with it like I did of not knowing when to not drink,
mm,
then it becomes really easy, to be able to go out and get a drink. And I have to say, like, I live in Dublin, right? So it's part
yeah.
of the culture, the drinking culture. And that didn't help either because I didn't see even more that I didn't have a problem. Because if I compared myself to, you know, um, people drinking here, my drinking was normal. It wasn't anything bad. Maybe if I
Mm,
was living in somewhere where alcohol wasn't as accepted, or maybe it wasn't like the norm, for every weekend, then I'd be like, maybe there's something here. But for me,
mm,
it just felt like, oh, like I like this. I like this culture. This it's
yeah.
great for me.
Like
Yeah.
this is fun and it's just standard because it would be hard to recognize anything within yourself necessarily even if you're waking up the next day feeling awful and you're like, oh, this is just a hangover, and everyone else that I'm spending time with is basically drinking what looks to be the same amount as me. So
Hmm.
there's kind of no signals necessarily along the way that something might be off. So it'd be so
Yeah,
easy just to keep going. And as you said, yeah, you've
exactly.
got those friends that you'll go out with regularly and have fun with. Um, but was it, I guess, was one of the signs when, as you, I think you said, was it sort of the Tuesday night drinking started kind of coming into your routine?
Yeah, so that started happening, and that happened for a while actually. That would have been
Mm,
that would have happened for, I'd say, pre-pandemic.
yeah.
Um, and then I think the pandemic sort of stalled the
Mm,
drinking. Actually, I wasn't drinking. Maybe like the first few months, I wasn't drinking that much at home or anything. But then I went back into drinking a little bit more often as well, or again
mm,
at some point, and that wasn't never really an indicative to me or something that I would have said, oh, there's something there just because I'm drinking like
uh,
midweek. Like
yeah.
strangely enough, I don't know. I never really saw it as something different or that it could be a problem. I think
Mm,
when I started realizing that there was a problem was when I when my lows were really low and my highs were very high. And
mm,
I wouldn't say that I had very high highs. It was more the lows were more
yeah.
frequent and were there more often. And
Mm,
then I would feel really. I think something like worth mentioning as well is whenever I went out drinking was I was seeking connection. I was seeking like
mm,
real friendship or just being social, but I didn't just want to be social. Like I think I was genuinely looking for connection and belonging,
mm,
and I would have had the opposite effect whenever I was going out because you're drinking, so you're not actually making this deep connection with anyone, and then because I wasn't finding this connection and belonging, I was left feeling completely isolated afterwards. So
mm,
I would come home and I would sometimes when I would come home after a night out, I would feel super low and I couldn't believe that
mm,
I was back home. I didn't feel peace coming back home and being like, okay, I'm going to bed now. I would feel
mm,
like, oh my God, I'm so lonely. Why? Why do I feel like this? And so then instead of looking at the root of the problem, then I would just, like I said, just look for the solution, the easy, quick solution, which was
mm,
drinking and drinking soon again. And if that meant on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, then I would do it because I couldn't. I hated feeling that
mm,
loneliness and that isolation, and and it was it was really contradictory what I was doing because going out and drinking and going out to pubs and or wherever I was drinking, it was giving me that effect of loneliness even more.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting how you say that you go out seeking connection, like that's the why behind it. But you're so
Hmm.
right that when you're, after a few drinks, you might be having what you think is a good time and meeting new people or whatever and having yarns, but the connection isn't actually genuine. Um,
Hmm.
and then you're left kind of constantly seeking that, or the thing that you've gone out looking for, you didn't get. And then, yeah,
Hmm.
you come home at the end of the night and you're like, oh, well, that didn't fix it. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I don't know if I think when I was younger, I particularly was, a bit more shy and introverted. And so after a couple of drinks, you'd be like, oh, I'm a bit more chatty, a bit more confident. Was that
Hmm.
part of the reason why you drank as well? Did you feel like a more confident kind of version of yourself?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah,
Mm,
I am a much more introverted person as well, and I didn't grow up. I guess feeling like that was okay. I think I grew up
Mm.
because of society in general, or
Mm.
yeah, I think what I observed was, the people who are loud and who are always out there are the people who are succeeding in
Mm.
even in school, and like having friends and being friends with the teachers, and they're the people who I looked up to. And that meant that my personality, which was a little bit more calm and more introverted, and maybe like the things that I enjoyed weren't okay, and that I needed to
Mm.
do a little bit of effort to be part of what everyone else was doing. And definitely that meant drink drinking. And when I
Mm.
was drinking, then what happened was my yeah, like everyone else, I guess my inhibitions went down, and I wouldn't really mind anymore what came out or what I would say or what, which
Mm.
sometimes I helped me in feeling more confident, but then sometimes it didn't help me because what would come out maybe were repressed feelings of,
Mm.
I don't know, of like maybe if there was some anger in my life at that point, then I would take it out on someone and I would start a fight. Well, not a fight, I'd never fought, but like
Yeah.
a a dialogue, like an angry dialogue, I guess.
Mm.
And I never really had moments of being called out on it. Um,
Mm.
I think maybe I did at some point, you know, I did have some moments of being called out on it, but never to the point where it was like, and when I say called out, I mean like called out on my behavior when I was drinking.
Mm.
But it would always be like, I would be called out on it, and then it would be like brush it off because it was funny. And oh no, it's funny. I don't know. It was just like
Mm.
you were just drunk, and that was my thinking process. Like, oh, I was just drunk. Whatever. It's not
Mm.
real. But you can't divide what life is. Life is just life. You're not There's no real and not no real. It's everything that you do
Mm.
is real. So yeah, at that point I didn't understand it, but looking back now, I'm like, I don't know, like I hate the fact that I would have had that too, like duality of like I'm this person when
Mm.
I'm drinking and that's okay, but I'm like this nice, gentle, peaceful person when I'm not drinking, and that's really
Mm.
who I am. I didn't realize that no, I'm both parts, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting, and taking ownership of the parts of you that you may not like that come out when you're drinking, because that's, as you said, yeah, when your inhibitions are lowered, all those parts come out. And then I guess you go back to your day to day life and put them back away and pretend that
Hmm.
both parts of you don't actually coexist, because I guess there's sort of a process of learning how to integrate both of those into your life. And
Yeah.
it's so true. Like in your early 20s, I think for probably most people, it's a bit of a journey of self discovery. And I love what you talked about there, being like being more introverted, but that's not really demonstrated to us in society about what that
Hmm.
looks like or whether or not that's what a successful person is. And
Hmm.
that's kind of a factor that I hadn't probably really thought about as well with drinking, is being like, oh, extroverted people are more celebrated. Therefore, I
Hmm.
will have a couple of drinks and make myself more extroverted.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's like putting all those connections together. Um, did you have, was there a bit of a like turning point or a moment where it all got too much and I guess caught up to you?
Yeah. So that would have been exactly a year ago, 17th of April.
Mm.
And I guess leading up to the 17th of April of last year, basically, I was going through a rough time again.
Mm.
Just, I think, just personal things, nothing too intense, but it was,
Mm.
again, I wasn't properly kind of dealing with what was going on in my mind. And I was so caught up in having fun and just
Mm.
going out and drinking, and I I started drinking more. And what happened was, because I was drinking so much, when I was going out, I started losing that, I guess, that high feeling, if you could call it that.
Mm.
I started losing that, yeah, that moment of freedom that the alcohol gives you, and I just couldn't feel anything anymore.
Mm.
I wanted to feel something when I was drinking. I
Yeah.
wanted to escape, and I couldn't anymore. So I would go straight into like drinking shots and drinking whatever I could put in my system to make me as drunk as I could, to forget and to numb
Yeah.
myself as much as I could. And that was that was, you know, one night, and then it was the second night, and then again, and then again, and then again. And
Mm.
that was over a span of, I'd say, like, it was probably like from a couple of months. So I think it started maybe like in March. Actually, a little bit before. So let's say probably
Mm.
February. So February to March, and then March to April. Those were the worst months,
Mm. So
and
was it
it
every day? Like it
I
turned
wasn't
into every day?
I wasn't drinking every day. No, I was drinking
Mm.
mainly weekends, and then yeah, I would drink like on the occasional day, like on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I
Mm.
would say maybe like 3 times a week at least. And if there were
Mm.
more times, then I would have drank more. But it was more so the amounts that I was drinking.
Mm.
And so that became worse and worse. And then I remember the feeling of isolation came and
Mm.
became worse. And the the thing is, I wasn't isolated. I have friends, I have family. I'm surrounded by a lot of people who love me, but I felt lonely, and
Mm.
it became bigger and bigger, that feeling of isolation and emptiness. And then I think what happened that day on April 17th was that a day before I had gone out drinking, and I had just, again, instead of going home, at an acceptable time, I had pushed it to the limit, and I
Mm.
tried to find ways to keep going. And so I was home the next day, and I felt completely empty. I
Mm.
felt completely lonely. I couldn't really understand how I had gotten to that point in my life. And it was like one of those moments where you just feel like, who am I? Like, I don't want to be this person. It's not me.
Mm.
I don't want to, I don't want to live a life that just revolves around drinking. And, at that point as well, like, I wasn't really doing the things that I like doing. And, you know, I wasn't going out into nature and doing hikes and doing
Mm.
just things that make me genuinely happy. Like, I was just going out and drinking. And so I couldn't like understand who I was at that moment. And I
Mm.
that whole, like, it was that morning of the 17th where I woke up, and I was like, I felt so lost. I felt so lonely. I felt like I was like in a limbo. And I can feel that feeling. Like, if I just remember now, I feel that it's like in my heart. It feels like
Mm.
an emptiness inside. And it was so strong that I remember feeling like, I never want to feel this ever again. There's no way that I'm going to keep living like this. And I don't I don't see myself like living another day that with the life that I'm living now. And like, I wasn't, in a bad place where I was like, I don't want to keep going. It was the opposite. It was
Mm.
more like, I need help. I need
Mm.
I need to stop drinking, and I can't do it by myself. I can't, like, I couldn't see myself, im- if I thought about not drinking, I couldn't see myself not drinking the next weekend. So I knew that
Mm.
I couldn't just stop
Mm.
completely. And I knew at this point that I needed help. I wasn't sure like if I had an alcohol problem per se. I wasn't like, at
Mm.
that point I wouldn't have said like, I'm an alcoholic, or I
Mm.
I have a problem, or I don't know, like, I wouldn't have seen it like that at that point. I think it was more like, I can't stop drinking, so I really do need help. But it was it was a moment of clarity that I hadn't had ever before.
Mm.
I was definitely in a place where I didn't care about anyone judging me. I didn't care about anything except getting help. Definitely then I knew that I was going to be okay. Like
Mm.
it it was that moment of clarity of I'm I'm okay. Like I think I'll be able to make it. Like I'll be fine.
What's the process been like? I guess letting other people in and sharing this with like friends and family.
It's been a yeah, it's been tough to open up to people
Mm.
in my life that actually know me. Especially it was tough with my family at first because
Mm.
with them I had obviously never been open about drinking, and they knew that I drank, but I wasn't
Mm.
very open about how often I was drinking or yeah, like partying and stuff. And when I opened up to them, I did it individually. Like I had a conversation
Mm.
with every member of my family, like my mom, my dad, my sister, and my brother separately,
Mm.
and
Mm.
and I just shared with them a little bit of what was going on, and everyone was super supportive and wanted to help me. And it
Mm.
was, in a way, it was a little bit hard for them as well because they wanted to support me as much as they could. And I think sometimes, like when someone's going through a rough time, you want to help them, but there's nothing that they can do. It's something that,
Mm.
I knew that it was all on me, except like the support that they gave me helped me so much. It did. It helped me like tons, and I can't ever thank them enough for everything that they did for me
Mm.
with just being there. They didn't really need to do much except just being there and
Yeah.
listen to me. And also, one thing that helped me so much was that they weren't judgmental. They
Mm.
they just listened, and they understood and gave me my space, and didn't say, there's so many things that people could say, like that could affect you, like I don't know,
Mm.
like little things like well, you should have stopped when you had the chance. I don't know, I'm just making these things up, but negative comments
Yeah.
that could have been made, but
Mm.
nothing. Everything was just amazing, the way that they helped me. And to this day,
Mm.
there's no judgment, there's just support.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, and
Mm. That's so good to hear.
it's super nice. I'm very grateful for it. Yeah. But then I have to also mention the other part of opening up to friends, and that has
Mm.
been tough as well because there's some people that have been in my life, forever, and it's been easier to open up with them. But there's people
Mm.
that haven't been in my life for that long, but they're still close enough to me that I want to be open with them.
Mm.
And I have been with a lot of them, and there haven't there hasn't been any judgment either. Like everyone's been quite supportive, but it feels a little bit tougher to share those conversations because it is really hard to talk about this without the stigma around it. And
Mm.
that's also part of why I want to be more open about it, and share it as part of my own journey without
Mm.
being afraid, because I I couldn't find much information about it myself when I was looking into it, or
Mm.
more specifically, I couldn't find a lot of relatable uh, people out there, not in the meetings,
Mm.
but like more so in the just, I guess, outside world. So I remember
Mm.
going on YouTube or going on Spotify and trying to find
Yeah.
podcasts of people who
Yeah.
who were similar to me, or something similar had happened in their lives, or
Mm.
similar upbringing even, or or age, anything that I could sort of relate to and find,
Yeah.
yeah, find help in that. And I remember,
There was nothing.
no, there's not much out there. uh,
Mm.
and I think that's because of the stigma, definitely, the judgment around it. And it was something that I've had on my mind for a long time, that I if there's someone that I could help, like I would have liked to have found
Mm,
that help. I would I would love to be open about it and help anyone that wants to ever reach out. Like I think that's part of what a lot of people who have recovered from alcoholism have or are doing.
mm. I think that's beautiful, and so happy that you've chosen to share on the podcast as well. And it is a bit disheartening when you hear that, there are people like your past self looking for resources, something that's relatable, and there's actually nothing out there. So the fact that
Hmm.
you get to be that for someone else as well is just
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you. And thank you for as well being so kind to me and wanting to share this space for me.
That's okay. Um, do you feel like this could be a slightly deeper question?
No, it's okay.
um, I guess there's like possibly parts of yourself that you were either like sort of putting in a box to one side that you didn't want to look at, or things that you may not have wanted to address that might have sort of come into the daylight over the past year or so. Do you feel like
Hmm.
you've kind of gotten to know yourself better as well through this
Hmm.
process?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. There's no doubt about it. I there's definitely parts of me that I discovered, parts that I didn't want to look at. And
Mm,
for example, I didn't fully enjoy being by myself. And that I found it really hard to sit at home on a Saturday night and enjoy being there,
mm,
just watching a movie. Or I had to always find something to do because I couldn't sit with myself and my feelings.
mm.
And and through the process of recovery, I love myself. I love sitting by
Ah,
myself on a weekend.
yay.
There's nothing I would rather do more than be with me and to
Mm,
do things with myself. And like in terms of like, not just sitting at home, but like go on a hike or
mm,
go to the sea, or d- genuinely doing things that aren't just automatic, because I would have gone to the gym by myself, like all these things, but genuinely spend time or travel by myself. I did my first real like vacation by myself when I got sober,
yay.
and that was the nicest moment. Yeah. And I think also I started doing things without relying on other people. So, as I mentioned, I love hiking, and I didn't
Mm,
really have that many people to do it with.
yeah.
So I started a hiking group for women,
Oh,
and
wow.
there's 100 women in the group now.
Ah,
And
that's so cool.
yeah, and I organize hikes, and whenever I want to go on a hike, I post in the group, and I'm
Ah,
like, "Who's up for a hike?" And I've
yes.
met amazing people. I met one of my really, really good friends who, yeah, she's become like a really close friend, and also I've
Mm,
met just wonderful, wonderful women who are, you know, sometimes on similar boats and have similar stories, and
mm,
sometimes completely different stories, but it's there. And I never would have been able to take that initiative before. I would have just, waited around, like there's no people, or I would have been like,
mm.
there's no one to go on a hike with, so I'm not going to do it. But now
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with myself enough to know that I can do these things, and that there's no there's no problem, there's no negativeness to it. There's just
Mm,
positives coming. And with that, amazing things have happened in my life as well. Like, I think with just being more in touch with my emotions, and with embracing as well, like my introvertedness, I have
mm.
realized that I love reading. I love reading. I love science
Yes.
fiction, and this is something that I would have been like, but it's not cool. I genuinely would have had that thought in my head, but now I'm reading so much, and I love being at home and
Mm.
reading.
Oh. I
And
love I'm so here for that. And I love
yeah.
that like you've started this whole group and it sort of it's this full circle kind of moment where you were saying earlier that you'd go out and drinking looking for connection.
Hmm.
And then you've literally created a community where you get that genuine connection and in nature as well. So you're like more
Hmm.
grounded and more comfortable. And
Hmm.
you've done that yourself, which is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I.
um, I guess one final thing before
Hmm.
we finish.
Hmm.
Um, is there anything that you like to tell our listeners? Is there anything that you wish people knew more about the journey that, or a past version of you would have found really useful?
That's a really good way to end the podcast and really nice question.
Thanks.
Um, I would say that it's really easy for us to sometimes act um, or do something that doesn't feel right. A lot
Mm,
of the times we have this feeling inside that we know what we want to do, but we somehow manage to end up doing something completely different that we don't actually want to do. Um, and and I would say that it's really important to listen to that gut feeling that you have inside, because otherwise you're just going against yourself. You know, there's no point
mm,
in that. So I would say for me, that's been something that I've really found that it's what's helped me in my recovery, like to stop listening to the judgment, the stigma, the negative sayers out there, and
mm,
really focus on what do I really feel that I want to do. And if that means getting help, if you deep down in your soul know that there's something wrong with the way that you're, it could be anything, it could be the way that you're drinking, the way that you're,
mm,
I don't know, engaging in, I don't know, like personal friendships even, or
mm,
something that's not good for you anymore. I i i would really just, I couldn't emphasize it more and try to
mm,
encourage people to really trust that feeling inside of you and trust yourself, and that no matter like what the judgment is, that you always have yourself, and that's the most important thing. And that if you ever need help, you just have to ask, because there's always going to be help out there and someone who will listen to you.
mm. I love that. Thank you. And yeah, it's so interesting thinking about, I guess, all the ways that maybe just life these days, there's so many ways of distracting yourself and disconnecting from those feelings and getting to know yourself and all the whole range of emotions, like the good and the bad. And sometimes it's easier to find distractions and they'll probably look different for other
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
But actually it's a really big step taking away those distractions and actually sitting with everything and kind of coming back to yourself and who you are. But you know, the light at the end of the tunnel and who you get to be at the end of it is beautiful, and you've been through that whole process and
Mhm.
living a
Yes.
fantastic life now.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm very very grateful to, yeah, to be at this point now in my life, and it's been a long journey, but
Mm,
I wouldn't change anything of it, and I'm super happy. I'm super happy, and I also should say I still have my moments of being low like anyone else, but they're
mm,
definitely not as frequent. They're definitely not as strong. And now, if I do have that feeling of low, I know that I can reach out to friends, and I know that I actually have people who want to listen to me and be there for me. So those feelings, I guess, aren't as terrible as they were before. It's just now part
mm,
of life, like anyone would have those
mm.
moments. Yeah.
Yeah, and finding that the community and the safe spaces where all of those feelings are valid and you get
Hmm.
to be yourself as well is so important.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm,
Definitely.
yeah. Thank you
Mhm.
so much for joining me and celebrating that it's almost been a year. By the time this comes out,
Yes.
it'll been a year already.
Oh, thank
And
you
thank you
so
so
much.
much for sharing in such a vulnerable way this part of your story. And I really appreciate you sharing it with me as well.
Thank you. And oh, I appreciate you, like I said, giving me this safe space and wanting to hear my story as well. So thank you so much.